The Journey Through a Distant Land, the Metaphysical Articles of the Individuality, written by Javon Lately, M.B., Reading 2. A short hybrid poem written out of love for two beings, called The Wisdom of Laura. The beginning of love is the sacrifice of oneself. All your wants and needs, worldly superficial wealth. The proof of love is in the eyes, full of emotions and passions to produce a woman's cry. Would I be the fault of her lamentation? I think not, for our love runs adjacent. She is used to men's lies. That is their loss, because now she is all mine. She dealt with men who were cruel, with a form of verisimilitude. Could I convince her otherwise, or would she look upon me with demise? She told me stories of nefarious sights, things that she experienced in her darkest night. I was very sympathetic to her plight, so she led me to the light. Those days are over for her saying, "Why did you lie to me?" She would spend the rest of her days with me, full of camaraderie. Article 1.1, The Beginning. Mankind's mind has fallen so far from the true self that the mere understanding of who he or she is cannot be understood. In this fallen state, he or she is incapable of understanding higher knowledge that will make him or her king. The knowledge which I convey here now will allow mankind to unite its original self to the divine being that created it. This knowledge did not and would not have ever existed until the day of the great appearing of the divine consciousness, in which if a person could detach his or her hidden self from the sensual mind of their biological makeup, which is the only thing that allows any person to have physical existence through the five gates of the senses, it could willingly grant that person immortality and the opportunity to form a higher body not made of flesh that will advance one's evolution. Mankind's mind seems, at least in this realm, to be attracted to illusions and non-truths. Therefore, through this elusive thought, I will attempt to use the very thing which is prohibiting him, or her, you, from knowing the true nature of the true self. I will give you to think, give you the illusion that I am not speaking of who you call God, which is actually called Elohim. If you are given the truth plainly, your carnal mind that is ruled over by the anti-life will not allow the entry of this truth to take root and become part of your being. It is likened to a surgeon who has to take his time to slowly remove a tumor from the patient's brain. If done too fast, without careful attention, it would kill the patient. When one tries to introduce the notion of the Supreme Being in any conversation, it seems to produce perplexity and discombobulating ideas, agitation, hatred, and a complete meltdown on the very fabric of one's soul. This will destroy the soul's ability to see beyond itself. The reason this is so is because the Creator being a spirit, which by its very nature is invisible, cannot be measured or observed. Mankind is trapped in a catch-22. It can only base its reliability on information that comes from the five senses of the body, and anything outside of that does not exist to it. With this in mind, I believe, at most I hope, that we can agree that it at least had to be a self, a human consciousness that evolved into existence. So, I will speak in layman terms. I will speak in the natural sense of the true self. To begin, let's begin with the event that brought forth this self. In the beginning was the Creator, the Holy Almighty Father. The Father is so magnificent in this state that no created being could comprehend His majesty. So the Father created a form for Himself, a form of man, which is the Word, the true self. The true self was in eternity alone, It was not subjected to time. It was not subjected to days and years. This true self wanted to express itself, to be revered, honored as holy, to project happiness to a created being that will be coming forth later from itself. The true self formed first, a creature with the capacity to choose. The first creation could conform to the divine will, the only source that keeps it alive, or it could form in opposition to the divine will and go its own way to establish its own will. The first created creature decided to deviate from the divine will and conspired to form and to create its own image, a counterfeit to the true self called the false personality. This new change in direction from the first created being brought opposition to the higher wisdom that preserves order in the universe. This balanced order was in jeopardy of being combined with a new counterfeit image of itself. Thus, the original true self faced contamination. Order had to be protected to hold the universe in balance. By this deliberate deviation from the will of the true self, the first creature lost its place in the higher states of consciousness. It could no longer be permitted to keep its place. For if this altered creature was not exiled, the higher states of consciousness would have been violated due to the rebellious cataclysmic affront if this creature remained therein. The first creature was cast down to the lower earth consciousness, better known as the mundane consciousness. The true self did not give the power of procreation or the power of destruction to the first created creature, now better known from its artificial image as the false personality. So, the false personality could do nothing but run to and fro, condemned to continuously run the course made by its fatal decision, that thereby introduced to the universe various evil methods of expressing the false personality, which is the image of the first created being. As a result, it was brought before the true self to make a second creature. However, this time the true self would form this creature with a special nature. It would possess the true self's full expression. It would be formed in its image and in its likeness with enhanced powers to create and add to its own expression. Unlike the creation of the first created being, it did not create this second creature with the same nature the first created being was formed with. The true self vouchsafed another gift to the second created creature. It gave this second created being individuality, the ability to add a unique creative form to the will of the true self, thus endowing serenity in this new being, bestowing upon it the gift of sight to see itself, giving it the power to feel self-awareness, initiating a new action that would allow this creature to feel free. Even in its dependent capacity as a created being, it did not feel like a slave. It felt itself as a co-creator with the true self, giving it the ability to realize and to know that it bore a responsibility of forming and establishing higher levels of awareness that were able to ascend within the higher kingdoms of consciousness. In the process of assisting in the creation of the paradise, both of them became now really one, because the second created being is working inside of and with the will of the universal true self. Seeing that the true self made the second created being in the exact image and likeness of itself. Beautiful as all this sounds, it was not yet perfect. The second created being did not understand the love of its creator. The second created being only loved because it was love itself. The very nature of the true self was imbued in it. There was nothing visible to the second being to compare the true self to. Something else had to be introduced to this new creature, a thing that could cause the second created being to appreciate and to earn all which the almighty true self is, all that the true self grants out of love. Now, behold, yea, in the midst of this paradise was a hidden modus operandi. A command was given that could not have been obeyed, a command that, if not obeyed, would preempt an act of revealing the decision that the first created being made. The true self, from its divine wisdom, knew that to have a child that would be co-creator with it, That child would have to know all that has been disrupted, all that has to be rectified in order to have an understanding wholeheartedly of what to correct, to know all which has taken place in these higher realms. If one was brave enough, if one would sacrifice one's life in paradise, one would activate this modus operandi and die in consciousness. One would thereby make visible a dimension of preparation. This new world would do two things. It will initially give to the first created being, the false personality, a field of action, a concrete, physical, visible world to become real, and a solid earthly world to act out all of the manifestations of the false personality. Second, it will allow the second created being to separate through the illusions and extract the truth, therefore choosing with its own free will to love the truth and to gain a true love for the true self, to have an individual unique way of loving its creator. This is done by freedom of choice, not by a forced application as one being pushed to do it, or one who is naturally created thus. However, even this produces another great danger. The great danger which I speak of now is the enticement of the evil, the counterfeit, the danger of being lost to the evils, the danger of choosing the false over the real. From the knowledge of this modus operandi, the second created being took on a second form, a corporeal form of fleshly matter. It took on a form suitable for the new modus operandi to allow a field of action for both powers of the false personality and the true self-creator. This allows the second being freedom to choose which one to obey and worship and which one to love. Not only this, it has a choice to create itself to be holy like its creator, or to create itself into that dark image of the opposite power of the first created being, who is not real, but yet seen through the now new modus operandi, which is the realm of time and space. If the second being chooses that new counterfeit, which is contrary to the way it was formed, contrary to its existence, the false personality will take over the second being and overriding the individuality of it and temporarily suspending the will of the second creature. The false personality would now have free reign to operate and to express itself in the second created being. It now holds the second being as a slave, and the second being now has to stay inert and suffer the consequences of the actions of the false personality. The second being was tricked, seduced, and misled to believe that the false personality was the second being in itself. Now, in this situation, the second being brought into its existence a false power that is inferior to him. The power of the false personality and the now new physical plane that the false personality rules lives on the outside of the second being. These are the only things in the universe that are not inside of the second being. The second being is a duplicate of the true self. Therefore, it is a king like the true self, created to share the throne, destined to rule the kingdom of the true self, which is not a physical concrete world. The second being is ruler over the first created being and its image, and the false personality cannot enter inside of the second being without its permission. The only thing that the false personality can do is to try to tempt and deceive the second created being from the outside world. The false personality can only use the false images from the concrete earth to seduce the second created being by using the temporary resources of the physical world. Just like the true self, the second being is supposed to follow the example of the true self and cast down that fake alien, the evil counterfeit, false self that is contrary to it, which is trying to copy the original of the true self. Thereby, the second being also is one and the same with the creator, true self. The will of the true self is to eventually destroy the blasphemous false personality. But the true self needs this apparatus to aid in the forming of its duplicated self, which is the second created being. Once the true self sees that time is brought before its field of vision to eradicate the ram of time, the new modus operandi that is now operating inside of eternity, then the false personality will be cast out of the true self rendering the false personality inoperative. For the first created being and its image, which is the false personality, would then, as a result, be no longer accessible in consciousness. Only now is this allowed to happen inside of the true self for a set time and preparation. For none of this is capable of existing in the first place without the true self power of divine existence. The true self is the giver of life, and nothing outside of it is able to live without existing in the only power that has the power of actualization. To present the remedy, the second created being has to first cast down all of the false aspects of the false personality. It has to search its own self. Before this can be accomplished, the second being has to relearn the meaning of the true self. It will have to go to the spoken word of the true self. I will give you a clue. It can be understood and felt in a book. However, I am afraid of naming the book from the danger of losing you in this thought, knowing that mankind, the second created being, will call forth prejudiced thoughts one has grown accustomed to, formed from the misconceptions employed by the manipulation of the false personality. I will give you the code of the book. I will give you the hidden meaning of the book. The name of the book is The Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth. The false personality over time has altered this book more often than we can count. You would have to go to the closest version to the truth you can get access to. Once you read this book and accept everything you hear in this book will hurt and offend you. It feels like it is hurting you, but on the contrary, it is not. The words of that book is hurting and offending that vile thing that is holding you captive, the false personality. The second step after reading the book of power and searching yourself is to sacrifice the false personality. A question might appear in your thinking apparatus, which would sound like your voice. It would give you to think that it resonated from yourself. The question can come in a fashion of sarcasm that is heavily mixed with doubt, saying, how can one sacrifice the false personality? I don't even know what it is. Having a personality is good. This is who I am. This is what makes us different. My personality is what makes me unique. Oh, poor little second created being. What do you want me to say to you? If I say people, you do err. It's not that which is good. It's not that which makes you different. It is not that which makes you unique. I can also tell you that the false personality is the one that told you this in the first place. You have been lied to by it. The false personality has all the evil attributes of the first created being. Will this help you? I would say nay, nay, nay. It will not help you. Even this negative and very pessimistic statement is detestable. This remark leaves an extremely bad taste in my mouth. But it is that which is true. For you would not be persuaded by me, by anyone from the dead, by any earthly spirit, by any heavenly being, and sadly to say, not even from the true self itself. For the true self is already here. It is screaming from the inside of yourself to you daily, yet you cannot hear. You do not have no eyes to see, so it won't take hold of thee. There is only one way for you to see this false personality. It has to be experienced. It has to be experienced. This is one of the reasons why you had to form it in the first place. Most of you do not know how you received it, let alone know that it is living your life for you, and not for your best interest, and not for the good of you. Let me take this time here to rebuttal one of the previous thoughts you decided to entertain. To be different, to be unique, does not come from the false personality who you now call your personality, taking ownership and serving, allowing a creature that is inferior to you to rule you and to make you its slave. To be different, to be unique, comes from individuality. This was given to you from the all-glorious and mighty true self. This is the real you inside. This is the unique part of you that could be added to creation, if you so will. By this new modus operandi, the ram of time and space, you are now in the land of preparation. Thus, you are a pre-existing created being, which has to be formed and created by you. your own self. This was arbitrated by the true self to give the individuality the freedom of self-existence. You, oh man or woman, oops, forgive me. I hope I didn't make you close the book. Second created being. Have a choice of creating yourself to live or to create yourself to die. For to be your personality is death, becoming that which will be discarded, that which will be no longer necessary. Lo, there is something that will be forever present, forever living, forever growing to more and more beauty that cannot be uttered. This something is the true self. The individual that chooses to live will partake in this immortality and beauty, seeing that it has established itself in those higher regions of higher thought, thus making itself a resident there by building its mansion in the higher consciousness. On the contrary, the individual has a choice to deny the true self, which is its real self, and go the way it thinks is its own. That way is not its own, but it is the way of the first created being, aka the false personality. To break this curse, the second created being has to give up the tokens that are given from the false personality. These are all the earthly and carnal things that are being glamorized by the false personality, appearing to be desirable to ensnare the second created being. These are some of the things that gives it the attributes of evil, attributes of the false personality. At this time, there should be now a different kind of thought in your thinking apparatus saying, what are the attributes of the false personality? The attributes of the false personality are all the earthly, carnal things that are beyond necessity, all the things that are beyond reasonable comfort. Also, it is that which suppresses the growth of holiness and that which caters to the concept of self-ownership or the "this is mine" concept. The false personality works this evil by the consciousness of the second created being. As the false personality infiltrates the second created being through sly, intellectual, and nefarious suggestions, the now weakened second created creature is perplexed. If the second created being is not armed with the reality of its own kingship, it will be violently occupied by the particular manifestation of the false personality. The second created being will then have his power suspended, allowing the manifestation of the false personality to act out and bring into reality the evils of the first created being. The first created being will then use your light, which is your consciousness, to reflect to the universe a false concept, pretending that the light is its own, thereby causing you to exhibit lunar or moon-like behavior. This is not appreciated by the true self. The true self wants the whole universe to reflect itself, not a fake, false concept that is not of its nature and not of its will. These concepts also stifles the real true wisdom that is holding the universe in peace and keeping it in total serenity. By now, it should be obvious that the second created being is man or woman. Hopefully, you are not offended by me using this term, seeing, dear reader, that you are obviously a part of mankind, with the verisimilitude of being the center of the universe. Mankind's only desire should be to establish his or her presence in the higher states of consciousness. But this action is being frustrated severely by the false personality. End of reading